Who wins the 2026 College Football National Championship? We will tell you in the next 15 minutes. The Miami Hurricanes, the home underdogs, currently catching 8 points with a total of 47. Bobby, let's break down both sides of the ball, and let's start with Miami offensively against Indiana's defense. What are you looking for on this specific side of the ball?
Yeah, I know that game, Indiana, Oregon in the Peach Bowl there didn't start off the way the Ducks wanted to with that pick six, but I thought on that scripted drive, right after, I thought Oregon thought they could run it a little bit against Indiana with the defensive line, and I thought they did okay early on, and then obviously just got completely game scripted out of that one with the lead Indiana got. And that one, and obviously Oregon had basically no depth at running back left, bringing guys over on defense over. So I still kind of believe that there was potentially some opportunities there, and that I think that this is going to be the biggest key to the game is how effective Miami's offense is. And I think it starts with Mark Fletcher on the ground, as they've done all playoffs, relying on him. Gained 90 yards at least in all three games, two of those games being above 30, including the game against Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl. And honestly, Miami's had more efficiency on the ground in the playoffs than they did during the regular season. They're going to need Fletcher, that ground attack. They're going to need to stay on schedule and not be one-dimensional, because if they do, we could see a repeat on that, similar to what happened to Oregon and where things can snowball against an Indiana team that's super disciplined. The Hoosiers do a great job of manufacturing pressure, disguising coverages. They'll need to rely on that experience that Carson Beck has just throughout his college career, being an older quarterback, identify those coverages quickly and go through those progressions and ultimately make the right decisions. If he does, if Miami stays on schedule, they're going to be live in this one from that perspective. I do think that, as we get to it a little bit later, that Miami with a low scoring game, I think that is correlated here with the pacing, because ultimately if Beck doesn't process well, in someone who it's been mentioned with questions about his arm strength at times. His fastball's in the low 90s now. He's not throwing 99 to paint in the corner, to give a baseball analogy. If he throws a duck to the Indiana secondary, especially on that out route, like we saw with Dante Moore, that secondary Pons, they can score. They can take it completely the other way, as we've seen a couple times. So I think those are the biggest keys with that one is Beck's eye discipline, making the right reads, and can Miami with Mark Fletcher stay on schedule?
Yeah, obviously Indiana can punish you for your mistakes, and we saw that in the Oregon game. What are your thoughts as far as the offensive concepts for Miami? Meaning they did an outstanding job of running those screens and and false screens to keep Ole Miss off balance and confused. But with a team as disciplined as Indiana, what type of wrinkles do you think that Mario will allow, or how out of the box, or do you feel like Miami will eventually get to the part of the game where they'll throw the kitchen sink, or is Miami really going to try to just line up and beat Indiana?
I think they're going to line up and try to beat Indiana. I think they'll continue with some of that screen game, because the real question is can Beck get it really downfield consistently? Sure, they might take a shot or two throughout the game, at a calculated time. But I think they're going to utilize that screen game as an extension of the run, like we've seen, get it out to the dynamic athletes, Tony, and try to get Daniels down the field as well. But yeah, I think Miami's just going to line up, and because despite Indiana's good defensive line, good defense, Miami's got a hell of an offensive line, and they're going to be able to be very physical in this game. So yeah, I think Mario's going to look at that and go, this is what got us here. This is who we are. And this is how we're going to attack the Hoosiers.
Switching over to the other side of the ball, can Miami's defense pressure Mendoza? Can somebody finally disrupt this guy? I mean, he's played like a superstar, honestly, against Alabama and Oregon, and second half against Ohio State. Very, very elite. That first half against Ohio State kind of looked more like regular Mendoza, which is still an exceptional player. But Bobby, what are your thoughts here on Miami's defense, and can they get pressure and penetrate the Indiana offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, what more can you really say about the Hoosiers and what they've done offensively? I know personally, just anecdotally, like I usually watch these games on the Skycast view because I like that overhead
Right.
shot. I feel like you get a great look at the coverages and whatnot. And specifically in that Oregon game, watching Mendoza process his reads, he goes on the touchdown to the left side. When they got to scored the tough third or fourth touchdown on the game to make it 21 or 28 through like an
Yep.
hour or something. It was just beautiful the way he processed that, and he was just doing that consistently, always making the right read, no matter what Oregon gave him. I thought that was amazing, and shows that he continues to shine, just like, and helps put these underrated, as we've talked about, Indiana skill position players in opportunities to succeed. And of course, want to make sure some of that credit goes to the Heisman Trophy winner. The big key for Miami, you mentioned the pass rush, but they're going to be without Xavier Lucas in the secondary due to a targeting in the semifinal against Ole Miss. They also
Right.
could be down a couple more guys in the secondary as well with injuries. I haven't seen the injury report come out just yet for the game, but that's something we'll be monitoring between now and kickoff on Monday night. It could be a big loss against these weapons. I anticipate Miami kind of being a little bit more vanilla early in this game with Lucas out, in order to try to prevent some big plays. And I think ultimately it could be worth it for Indiana to try to take some shots early against a younger, thinner secondary and try and test that if they get the opportunities one-on-one on the outside. The Hurricanes have done a great job this season stopping the run, top 10 in just simple yards per rush, top 40 in success rate, contained Kwan Lacey and Ole Miss outside of that one long run in that one. And they also did a good job against ground attacks of Ohio State, Texas A&M here in the playoff. I expect this to be the hardest time Indiana's had to run the ball throughout this playoff run for them. I think Miami's pass rush will get there a little bit on Mendoza and those offensive tackles. We might need to see Indiana use that screen game, use Mendoza's ability to get the ball out quickly and process, as we saw a couple times in that. I mentioned some of those third down throws in the Ohio State game after we talked about the Big Ten title game, because Penn State, Alabama, and Ohio State and Iowa did as well. 3 of those 4 games, Mendoza was sacked 3 times. In the Iowa game, I believe it was 2. But something Mendoza does really well is he doesn't take the big sack. All 3 of those games, it was like 3 sacks for like 20 yards. It's only like 5-6 yards. You're not taking the 10, 12, 15, 13-yard sack or anything like that. So he's using his legs to kind of step up in the pocket and minimize that a little bit. But I do think those defensive ends will have a chance to get Mendoza down a couple times. And does that happen on third down and help stop a drive for Miami? So the timeliness of that, I think that's going to be critical because I don't think they're going to be completely shut out in terms of defensive line sacks and penetration. But, they can't have it be 0. So I think that's the biggest key for them.
Does
Wouldn't be
Indiana
surprised if Indiana chips as well.
go back to just the ground game? I mean, Mendoza's been so exceptional, but I mean they've played with such a weird game state in their playoff games, meaning that both games were kind of put away handily. What was it, 17-0 at halftime of the Alabama game? So even that game state very unusual. But if this is back to a normal game state that we saw regular season Indiana, would expect a lot of running, which would correlate to the under. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do expect Indiana to try to run the ball. It's what they've wanted to do. Stay on script, stay on schedule. They're near the top in third downs, average third down distance, staying ahead. I expect them to try to do it. It's just a matter of whether it'll be effective. I don't think they're going to have an easy time with it, but I don't think they're going to be completely ineffective and shut out on the ground, if you will. So I do think it's going to become tougher for them. We've mentioned Indiana's pace a couple times on this show. They're not a very fast team either. I do think it could be good for them to speed up a little bit. I know Bud Elliott mentioned that on the Cover 3 podcast as well. I thought that was a really sharp thought that Indiana should try to speed up Miami a little bit to slow down those pass rushers. Now, will they do it? I actually don't think they will, but I think that could be an edge for IU to help them gain some more traction on the ground, get those pass rushers tired, and give Mendoza more time to throw the ball.
2 oddities to this game, that one of which you and I just talked about previously before recording, that's just worth mentioning, not handicap really related at all, is that one of these, whoever wins the game Monday night, will be the longest odds ever to win a college football national championship. Whether it be Indiana, whose preseason odds were anywhere from 150 to 200 to one, or Miami, whose preseason odds were 50 to one. So it's worth tuning in Monday night just to watch a little bit of history. The second oddity that I do have a question for you on, Bobby, is we haven't seen ever a team play for a national championship in their home venue. Obviously, this happened in the NFL within recent history, but it took 40 plus years for it to happen. Um, with both those teams actually winning outright. So, can the NFL teach us anything about what it looks like for a home team? And specifically, that Buccaneers Chiefs Super Bowl was a really good example. It's kind of where we're at here, where Miami is the home underdog playing in their venue, but obviously it's been a split crowd because of the ticket allotment. But is Miami having some creature comforts a part of your handicap at all?
I honestly like you saw that the crowd in Atlanta with the Peach Bowl where it was essentially Bloomington, Georgia, in that one.
Yeah.
I think that quite frankly, this game being in Miami is the only thing that prevents that from happening here. Quite frankly,
Yeah.
is that Miami, its fan base has actually zero travel. So I think the familiarity that site helps maybe subjectively Miami not feel, make it feel more normal for them. They're just going to their home stadium. I think they're going to be in the visitors' locker room, I imagine, with the
Right.
seating. That
They are.
so that'll be a little bit different, but ultimately it's the same venue, it's the same sidelines. I think they'll obviously have some fans, easy travel for them. With it being nothing, I think it helps them fractionally here. Wait, maybe because I do think that crowd's going to be super loud in favor of
Yeah.
Indiana, without a doubt. But and I don't even know if you can really even give them a half point, honestly, because
Right.
it's literally just familiarity. Because I think the crowd nullifies if it was any sort of bigger edge. Because I think Indiana is just like a crazed fan base, as they should be right now, where they're along for every part of this ride. They were at in droves for the Rose Bowl, their first Rose Bowl, I believe, since '67. Obviously, they took over Atlanta. They were loud and proud at basically Indianapolis against Ohio State as well. They're shelling out the dollars to go to every single one of these games. Crazed fan base. They're excited. They're going to show up for this one. So I do expect them to have a pretty big crowd edge, despite it being a literal home game for Miami. But I think the familiarity helping the environment of the magnitude of this game not feel so big, I think that fractionally helps Miami just a little bit.
Looking at special teams, the kicking game specifically, the edge has to go to Indiana, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the Miami kicker struggled against Ole Miss. Obviously, maybe that the wind caused issues against Texas A&M, but
yeah,
has not
I'll
kicked
throw
well.
out the A&M game.
Yeah.
Unless we see weather on Monday night. I have not looked at it admittedly because it's Miami, and I haven't seen any tweets or about weather concerns yet. But yeah, I would throw out the A&M game.
Opinion on the market. Where does this game close?
Yeah, from a side perspective, I think we're kind of there. I do think we might see a flash of Miami money at some point, just people thinking there's an over adjustment. I mean, we saw the look ahead be around 5.5 for this one. Now we're through the key of 7, obviously, after Indiana dismantled Oregon there. I don't think it's to the point where enough Miami money that this would close like a flat 7 or anything like that. I don't think we get there. I also don't think we ever see a 10 in this game. So it likely lives in this 7.5 to 9.5 range the entire time, where it's kind of been
Right.
since in the immediate aftermath of that game, of the Indiana Oregon game. I think you could see some 9s at some shops that are more apt to take public teaser money. Not something I'm necessarily recommending at all, but NFL divisional playoff games. There's like 3 games that are pretty teasable lines for that I think Indiana's probably would be a decent pair in that one. So you could see maybe some of the more recreational shops float some teaser protection 9s out there. But I think we're pretty stable as far as the side. In terms of the total, we are 48 and a half range until we saw a tick of under money, I believe, on Tuesday afternoon. Taking it down to 47 and a half. I tend to agree with that move. And I think that 47 is probably a better number than 48.
All right, Bobby. Well, we don't have best bets tonight, but we're gonna have to give out something because we're watching the game, and you might as well put a couple bucks on it. It is the last game of the year, and there won't be any more college football until week 0 kicks off sometime in August. For me, I'll go first. Give me Miami to 8 points, and we'll go under 47 in the same game parlay. If Miami's going to do this and keep it close, like you talked about, they're going to have to play ball control. It's going to have to look like a mirror to the Ole Miss game. It's not possible. They're going to put their best effort into keeping Mendoza off the field and keeping their offense on the field by any means necessary. And that's going to be a lot of running the ball. I think they'll be aggressive like they were on 4th down and trying to convert those 4th downs on the ground. Also, hypothetical markets before the Indiana-Oregon game was Miami plus 5.5, and now we're seeing 8. So perhaps there is some value in the side just simply because of the inflation from that Oregon game, which we talked about. There were mistakes, and a lot of that was driven by the running back room. I don't think that Moore makes that fumble mistake on the mesh handoff or the fake mesh handoff that created that fumble at like the 5-yard line if the starting running back is in the game. So a lot of the mistakes for Oregon were self-inflicted. Maybe Miami being a surrounding or comfortable surroundings of the home field, maybe that'll help minimize some of their mistakes. But for me, my money will be on Miami and the under. What say you?
Yep. So first off, I'll just say that best bets closed since we're not doing one today. 30, 34, and 1 on the season. It's not where we want to be, but that's where we'll.
5-2 in the playoffs.
Yeah, so. we closed well. We had a tough stretch in the October range there. But just say that. So for this one, I think we see a conservative start from the Hurricanes here. Mentioned what I think I see on defense. I think they'll be more vanilla there. We've also seen the tendency of Miami to be really slow in the first half. Miami is number 2 in the country in first quarter time of possession, number 1 in first half time of possession. So in addition to that, conservative calls on defense and ultimately believing that Indiana does not turn up the pace. I'll have a couple bucks here on first quarter under 9.5 as the angle in this one. So that's where I'll go there. I ultimately think first half under 23.5 is a good play as well. But I'll have a couple bucks on that first quarter under. In terms of how the game and who wins the national championship plays out, I think Miami's D-line is going to make some plays. It'll give the Indiana offense some trouble, prevent them from putting up a crooked number. Ultimately, Indiana has a massive coaching edge here. We've joked a couple times that Mario's a meme.
Right.
I'll give him lots of credit for this playoff run, trusting his coordinators and doing that, even if I still have concerns about some of the time management stuff that he has, beyond this playoff. But as overall, like Indiana's overall team discipline and ultimately the poise of the Heisman Trophy winner, I think it'll keep them ahead of the scoreboard. So I'll pick Indiana to win the national championship in something like a 24-17 type game in Miami on Monday night.
Bobby, we can't wrap up this show without going back to user questions, and we'll end this show with our favorite user, Charles, in the chat. And Charles wants to ask a non-college football related question. He wants to know, Bobby, who's the Browns head coach going to be?
I want to swear. I don't care. I like Stefanski. I don't like that they fired him. I knew this season in July they were going to fire him because I didn't think there was any offensive talent. So I think ultimately whoever they hire will be fired in 2 to 3 years anyway. So it's the next hire I'm concerned about. So I haven't really followed it because I'm just annoyed by it, to be honest. I thought the worst thing they could have did was keep one of the GM and the head coach. Right. And that was what they did. So I was like, all right, like I have admitted that they were going to fire Stefanski in July. And I was like, all right, if you're going to do that, just do both, or keep both, which was my preferred option. But they did the one. So they'll probably have another bad year next year, fire the GM, and then have everyone off schedule again and do it all again in a couple of years.
All right, Bobby, any final thoughts?
Just want to talk about Monday?
Bobby and I will be back here Monday night for whenever the second half, or I guess, whenever the first half ends. Bobby and I will actually go live probably right before that first half wraps up, give our thoughts on the game, perhaps any second half bets if we see any. But Bobby and I will be back here live, Twitter and YouTube, to give our thoughts at halftime of the national championship. Right
Looking
on.
forward to it. Really excited to try a halftime stream and figure the national championship game is a good time to do it.
Yep. So join us back here for halftime of the national championship. You can follow Bobby at BobbyDigital2 on Twitter. You can follow the show, which will be back here live at CFB900. It's been a really fun season, guys. Looking forward to seeing you on Monday night. Until then, best of luck. Adios.
Peace.